Hello and welcome to Garden Theory. Today we're going to be talking about some common landscape mistakes. This is coming from mainly my experience working the last few years in the horticulture industry. So these are some of the common mistakes that I've picked up on. I've been working in the landscape industry since 2020. And so these are some of the common mistakes I've seen while working as a landscape crew leader in Rexburg, Idaho, and in my current positions here in Northwest Arkansas. And so I hope this video will be a little bit informative for y'all, especially if you have ideas of installing new landscape features in your home, or if you have an existing landscape that you want to improve and help lower your maintenance cost, as well as the amount of work that you have to put into maintaining your landscapes. So hopefully this will be able to help you save your time, energy, and money to be able to maintain a beautiful landscape for your own backyard. So I kind of want to break this video down into a couple different sections. As you see today, I'm here on my couch and decided to record in here to have a bit more of a relaxing atmosphere, be able to just sit down and have a chat with y'all. But one of the first things that I've seen with a lot of people, quite understanding how growing zones work, as well as the lighting conditions for plants, and just kind of general plant care in general. And what I mean by this, is mainly utilizing your shade and moist areas in your landscape. So for your home, most people that are listening, you probably live in a neighborhood, kind of suburb home with four main sides. And here, if you live in the northern hemisphere, the south and west facing sides of your home are going to be the driest and hottest. And so these places are going to receive the most sun unless you have any large mature trees that are going to be providing shade. And even then, it's still going to be drier than it is on the east and north side of your home, where it's going to be shadier, more moist, and wetter. And so understanding how those microclimates work in your home is going to be a big factor on the long-term success of whatever you plant on each side. And so, for example, most lawns in the U.S., the most common ones I've seen are here in Arkansas are Bermuda grass, zoysia grass, and both of those are going to be a full sun grass. And so when you have grasses that like the full sun, and when you try to plant them under trees or in the shady sides of your home, you're going to notice it's going to start thinning out. And eventually, like some places, even where I live now, we're on the east side of our apartment's on the east side of the building, and so in front our whole lawn is just dirt because there's not enough sun to keep it alive. And so understanding the lighting conditions long term, especially if you have a new place with new trees, understand that as those trees mature, they're going to provide more shade, and so you need to be able to provide the proper climates for each thing. And so a common mistake I see also with trees is not having a proper tree ring around it. Ideally, you want to have your flower beds under your tree to extend to the drip line or the canopy of the tree. And now that seems like a big area. So like if you're planting an oak tree, you don't want to have a 40-foot wide mulch circle around it. It might look a little odd.
Another common issue I see with mulching in particular is a lot of times you'll see what a lot of people nickname tree volcanoes. Some people call them shield mound mulch volcanoes, mainly when the mulch sometimes pile upwards of 2 to 3 feet up against that trunk of the tree, and it's just really not healthy because these trees, they don't really need the mulch. The only reason we're putting mulch around these trees in the first place is to help protect them from the lawn, especially if you have lawn around your trees, because a lot of times you'll see people, if you have lawn going up to the edge of your trees, when people go with the string trimmer to trim them up, they end up kind of girdling those trees, and sometimes you can even kill the tree by doing that, as well as hitting it with the lawnmower when you're trying to mow around it. When we're putting these mulch rings around your tree, there's kind of two things you want to do. You want to keep the mulch relatively level and away from the base of the trunk of the tree, the root flare. That way the tree can breathe, because sometimes if you bury the base of the trunk can promote suckering, where the tree will send up little shoots everywhere because it's thinking it's buried. And it's just overall healthier for the tree. The reason why I suggest that you need to put your mulch and your beds under the tree to the edge of the drip line, because over time, as that tree matures, of course this may depend on what kind of tree you're talking about, like a pine tree or a spruce or a deciduous. But especially if you have something like a spruce or a magnolia where those branches like to go all the way to the ground, over time, it's going to take up that space no matter what you do. And especially if you have, say, like an oak tree or even a maple tree or any kind of large deciduous tree, it's going to cast a large shade shadow underneath there. And any lawn that you do have, it's just going to start thinning out and dying anyways. And if you have flower beds, I mean, you can just take advantage of that shade space and have a shade flower bed. It's going to provide a different growing zone than it would be if you had stuff outside of that drip line where it's in the sun. So overall, just for me, when you're designing things, it just makes sense to go ahead and plan to use that space either for a flower bed or any other purposes. Because a lot of times you'll just see people roll up your sod right up against the edge of the tree, and then eventually that lawn will die over time, or they put in a small mulch ring around it, either pile up the mulch too high, causing suckers to grow, and on top of that, over time your lawn's going to start dying anyways. So overall, it's just going to lead you more problems in the long run. But that's why I recommend doing that in the beginning. Even though, depending on your space, it may look weird. But if you have it already planned in your landscape design, and that's a big part of it, is having a very well-established landscape design beforehand. So if you're just kind of doing this willy-nilly without much thought, it's not going to look good in the long run, especially when you're dealing with trees. So making sure you have a solid landscape design plan as you go into your landscape, that's going to help you in the long run. And if you want to learn more about how to do that yourself, I did a whole video going into a 7-step process on how to design your own landscape. So if you want to watch that video, I'll have it linked above my head as well. And we'll just continue.
So those are just like some ideas of what you can do. You always want to kind of plan for the mature heights of your plants. One example would be overplanting, having things way too tight. And you'll see businesses and events do this a lot, where they'll plant things shoulder to shoulder in a line, which that's not how plants grow. They need adequate space to be able to grow into a mature and healthy form. Because when you plant things too close, especially trees and shrubs, over time their branches are going to intermingle with each other. And when those branches are touching each other, that's going to promote rot, diseases, and overall decrease the overall life expectancy and health of that tree or shrub. So understanding how to properly space things apart is very important. Now, if you want things to look full, you can do what a lot of places do, is they'll plant it tight and then remove them later. Which again, this is just adding more work that you don't really need, especially if you're talking about residential. And so if you can't wait for something to fill in, maybe plant some perennials around it that are more easy to move later, or even annuals, especially with trees and shrubs. Those are something I personally, because long term, we eventually want to own a home. And so when I start designing the landscape for our future home, that's something I'm going to keep in mind of. That's something that I personally can take care of if things look a little sparse in the beginning, because I know what it's going to look like in the long term. And that's going to save me a lot more time and energy and efforts on my part. Another thing I've seen, and I don't know if this is just an Arkansas thing, but not having proper edging on the lawns, especially here where we have mostly Bermuda grass that's super aggressive and loves to crawl its way into all the flower beds. There's usually two ways I've seen it that it's done, and that's either with concrete edging or with the steel edging. Personally, I prefer steel edging. I know when I've talked to people with this before in multiple places, it seems like steel edging has a bit of a bad rap for some reason. And I know, like, from examples I've seen in my local area, it seems like a lot of times the steel edging I've seen isn't properly installed, or it's sticking out 2 to 3 inches, and then sometimes it's completely out of the ground, which when you're properly installing steel edging, it needs to be almost near level with the lawn, if not slightly below it. And the whole point of having the edging with the lawn is to help contain that straight line, and it makes it really easy, especially if you have an edger. You can just run that edger along the steel edging and create that perfect line with your lawn. And that's something I definitely recommend. You can go with the concrete edging, but I'm sure that takes more time. I'm not as familiar with installing concrete edging, but I have installed steel edging myself. It's quite simple to do. Just dig a small ditch about 4 inches deep along the edge of your lawn, and you put in your 4-inch steel edging in there. Concrete edging, I'm sure, is slightly more complicated, having to mix it and having that form to put it in, but either way, I definitely recommend having edging because it helps to separate your transition zones from your lawn to your garden. And part of that might be personal taste, but that's something I definitely highly recommend, especially if you want something to look clean and professional. So another thing I've seen with lawns, typically the problem here in the US is people put way too much lawn in their backyard. And one of the things I've seen is you typically don't want lawn to go up against the edge of your building or against a fence, mainly because this makes you have to do more work with string trimming all the corners around the building. You're just adding more work for yourself. So it's always best to have flower beds along the edges of your buildings and fences, because that way, and if you have properly installed edging, all you have to do is run an edger along that steel edging and you got it done. Like, you don't have to be as finicky with the string trimmer trying to get all the little corners bits. And if you have things properly designed and easy smooth lines that are easy for a mower to mow, or you don't have any gaps in your lawn that need to be string trimmed, you just saved yourself a whole bunch of work, because you have to mow that lawn almost 26 to 30 times a year depending on your growing season. So if you're saving yourself that many times for the string trimmer, over the course of a year you save yourself probably a couple hours of work. And while we're on the topics of lawn, a common one as well, if you have irrigation, and I know here in the southeast, not most homes don't have irrigation, but I know out west where irrigation is a bigger deal. It's surprising how many irrigation companies sometimes don't install irrigation correctly. Even one time, while I was going to school at Brigham Young University, Idaho, one of our class projects was fixing an irrigation system that was installed by a company, but the irrigation didn't work because they had too many heads for the amount of water pressure they had. So making sure that you're working with, if you're installing irrigation, making sure that you're working with a reputable company, as well as designing your lawn to be able to fit easily within a grid, because that's how irrigation works. It's head-to-head coverage, and usually is planted in a grid where each head is able to have that head-to-head coverage with the water spray. And so if you have narrow spaces or wonky shapes, that makes it really hard to have good coverage of your irrigation and leads to more water waste. Taking irrigation in mind when you're figuring out how much lawn you want is something you want to keep in mind, especially if you're in one of the more water-prone areas like in the western United States. But even here in Arkansas, sometimes I talk to people about irrigation, and we get over 50 inches of rain where we live, and so some people don't take irrigation as seriously, but it's still something that we want to keep in mind. Having that water conservation, only using what we need, is still something important, at least in my mind at least. I think another common mistake is with water management. This is something I've learned more about since we moved back here to Arkansas. It wasn't something I had to deal with Idaho, where they get less than 12 inches of rain a year there. But here, in places that get a lot of rain, understanding how water moves through your space is really important. Having proper drainage and areas for your water to flow through is super important. I've come to understand here. And it's quite interesting how water moves through your soils. And so researching concepts such as rain gardens is something I've had a lot of fun researching. During an interview I had with a local landscape company a few years ago, talking to them about some of the common issues they have, and rainwater management was the number one issue that they had with clients. Understanding your topography of your site can help you with your landscape overall maintenance. Learning where your water pools can help you in the long run. Needs that you need to install a rainwater system, drains, as well as with plants. Any plants that can take, wet feet, that can soak up water pretty well. Doing research in that can be something beneficial for you. And as along with plants, I think another common mistake that I've seen is with invasive plants. There's a lot of invasive plants that nurseries sell that you need to keep in mind of, especially since a lot of us are starting to become more aware of the environment and conservation in general. I think learning more about native plants and invasive plants in your local areas one of the first things that is beneficial for you to do when designing your landscapes. If you want to learn more about native plants, we did do a whole video about it during our first week that our channel launched. So I'll have the link to it up above my head. So go watch that video after watching this one. But a great way to learn about native plants is to reach out to local gardening groups in your area. There's so many people in every area that you live in that know a whole much more about gardening than you do. I know it's something that I've learned a lot, is relying on some of the old timers that know a lot more about gardening and some of the plants that work really well in our area. I know I've shared this research before, but Wild Ones here in the United States is a great resource for finding native plants. And especially if you're in any gardening groups like on Facebook, many times they'll start having native plant sales around this time of year. And so definitely research into native plants, especially if you're looking into ones that are pretty good performers with their flowers. A couple of my favorites are like bee balm. Bee balms and milkweed species are some of the ones that I really like. I think overall, with landscaping, it's such a fun topic to talk about. That's why I made this channel, is to talk about landscaping and ways that we can improve it. And hopefully over time the videos that I make continue to get better, especially as I learn more about different topics and how different areas in the world handles gardening. It's a very fun topic. I really enjoy talking about it. And so hopefully you're able to gain a little something out of this ramble in today's video. This video was a little short notice. I didn't have as much time to prepare for it. But I am working on a pretty fun video on invasive plants and native habitat and wildlife and plant restoration, which hopefully will come out in the next few weeks here. But overall, I really enjoy working in the landscape industry. I first learned about horticulture and landscaping while going to college right at the start of the COVID pandemic while I was going to school. Took a class into Intro to Landscape Design, and it was so enjoyable. For me, landscaping really ties in a lot of my interests together into one career. Growing up, going to school, I was always more of an art and band kid. Always enjoyed drawing. Growing up here in the Ozarks, I've always loved exploring the natural world. I was in scouting throughout high school, so I've always enjoyed camping, learning about the outdoors, native animals. Didn't have as much of a native plant phase in high school, but once I learned about landscape design and how it puts all those interests into one thing for me, the art, the nature, and the science of it all, as well as the business side of it, everything just kind of clicked for me. And ever since then, I've kind of dived headfirst in it. Did an internship at a local landscaping company in Rexburg. Did a practicum with another one in Rexburg. Worked there in Rexburg for almost 2 years doing landscaping work, eventually working as a crew leader and training on new employees. And here in Arkansas, I've worked I mentioned in a previous video, at Crystal Bridges, where I learned a lot more about native plants, especially in the Ozarks, as well as long-term management of sites and of ecosystems, since the Crystal Bridges has over 100 acres of trails and grounds, and I managed a pretty good section of it. And currently, at my current role, where I learn more about landscaping and design, and everything has been a really wonderful journey, and I hope to continue to learn more about landscaping and horticulture in general in the future. It's something I have a pretty lifelong dream of, and I'm very excited for the day when we finally, hopefully, move or build a home for us. We definitely want to get into that stage where we have kind of a mini homestead, if you will. And I'm very excited to design my very own landscape, because I see different things that I like and don't like, and all the different projects I've worked on, and I'm very excited to be able to eventually, hopefully within the next couple of years, call a place my own and be able to create my own landscape design for myself. And so that's one of my probably biggest lifelong dreams, is to do that, to create something really beautiful that I've, not only something that I can enjoy, but something for my future family and for those that come to visit. So hopefully y'all enjoy this channel on my journey in horticulture, and I hope to continue to learn more. Feel free to comment down any ideas that, or any sources or channels that you really like that have similar content to mine for me to go check out. And hopefully I will continue to learn more. And if you ever have any ideas for me or any topics that you would like me to cover, feel free to comment them down below. And hopefully you like this sit down and chat type video. I don't know if I'll edit this too much in post-production, but I just wanted to have a nice chat with you all. And I hope y'all all have a wonderful day. I think hopefully the next video next week or the week after will be a little bit more polished. But thank you all for tuning in. And I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I hope y'all take advantage of this nice weather as spring comes around the corner, as we get into summer, and to be able to do some really fun landscape projects. And with that, thank you for watching Garden Theory, and hope y'all have a good rest of your day. So thank y'all.